The last day of class, we do have our final the following Friday, and for those of you who are not accustomed to the hack way, and this is the way it works at most colleges and universities, finals week is no classes, just whenever your final exam period is. If your instructor has not sent you an email or given you instructions about when your final exam is, don't forget, you can find the full final exam schedule on HAC's website under course calendars, and then there's a tab for final examination schedule. Your examination is Friday the 15th. I think it's 10 o'clock to noon, I think, if I'm correct. It's same class time conveniently. I did give you a rundown of what your options are for that test. And I also did give you, if you want to take it earlier in the week, I gave you an option of taking it at a couple of other times if you prefer to get it out of the way early. I am perfectly fine with that. But just so you know, there are no, don't show up Monday expecting to have class, because no classes at all during final exams week. Is that nice and clear? Did I talk too much? Good. Some students actually ask me if there's class, so I don't assume anything is obvious anymore. Last deadline for the Nietzsche homework is handing in it on our last class on Friday. We will be discussing Nietzsche. And don't forget, handing in that existentialism essay in class on Friday, or if you want to hand it in or email it to me before, that will be fine. I am going to have all of my papers graded by Friday night, so all I have on my plate is what? Nothing but final exams after that. I'm quite frankly graded out at this point. I graded 60 essays yesterday. It comes with the territory. But yeah, a couple of my classes, the big assignments are backloaded because you can't really do the assignments until you have the background. Of course, that means more papers at the end for them and more for me to grade. But I got them all done. And a little worse for the wear. But yeah, Friday is it. Friday is the deadline. So if you have anything to give to me or any special pleading of any sort to do, Friday is when the moaning curve is over. Good. Collected homework. Now I want to spend just a couple of minutes. Did anyone have any specific or direct questions that I didn't answer well about existentialism or existential themes, or any direct questions about the movie, one of the movies that you may not have understood, may have been confused about? Rania.
So when I was 5 easy pieces, would you say Bobby's just a result of leveling, and that he believes in nihilism because he has, nothing's a point to him?
That's pretty damn good, if you don't mind my saying. Now, by the way, for those of you who have not heard of this film or seen this film, it is one of Jack Nicholson's earliest roles. As a matter of fact, I think it's the first feature film where he was the main star. He got his big break when he got a role he wasn't supposed to get in the alienation and genre piece Easy Rider. How many of you have heard of Easy Rider or seen Easy Rider? Are you serious? Peter Fonda on his motorcycle, he's leaning back like, you haven't seen Easy Rider? But anyway, in the early 70s, he plays Jack Nicholson plays a character named Bobby Dupuy, who actually comes from an economically well-off background. He plays the piano beautifully. Of course, his family expects him to follow in the footsteps of the rest of the family. Turns out his family's all a bunch of phonies and a whole bunch of other things. But yeah, Bobby is alienated in an existential sense. Is that pretty much what you said? He is definitely alienated in an existential sense. He is leveled everywhere he goes. He runs away from his family, not authentically, by the way, but merely trying to escape something he can't handle. And then, of course, he falls into so many things. And as soon as he finds something where other people might actually beg him to find meaning in something else, or to find some kind of attachments, guess what he does? He runs away. He runs away. He won't allow himself to be leveled to the other. But in the process, he never actually becomes a what? Something that people who appreciate existentialism care about very much. Bobby never becomes a self worth calling a self. He lives inauthentically. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder too much. To me, it's obvious that he lives inauthentically. Even in his attempts to be an individual and to be on the surface level authentic. By the way, there's a funny scene in the film, and Ranyak will remember it. We discussed leveling and how society leads us into blind, mindless, and meaningless conformism. Bobby in this film is anything but a conformist. So on that level, he might actually seem to have more authenticity than some of the other everyday blokes you might come into contact with. There is a scene in a restaurant, and by the way, it's an iconic scene, where he wants to order something at a diner that is not on the menu. And take a guess what institution server does. Sorry, sir, you can't have that. That's not on the menu. I can get you this. It's pretty much what you want. So Bobby flips out, but before he flips out, he pretty much says, what I want is this tuna sandwich. But I want you to leave off the bread, I want you to leave off the mayo, I want you to leave off. So of course he ended up with what? So it would look exactly like he wanted. But of course he made a scene and flipped out, and well, he didn't end up getting anything. But indeed, Bobby looks, at least on the surface, to be authentic, because he is the individual trying to deal with meaningless, mindless conformism that we're likely to see in institutional settings. And he's certainly what? And by the way, I encourage you to see the film, it's well worth seeing. He is certainly a different kind of person. And unlike a lot of us, he does try his best to live in this, which I don't do a very good job doing. He tries to live in the moment. He tries to live in the moment. He tries to enjoy it in his own peculiar way. Without concern for what? For what people are going to think about him, nor for the consequences. There is a funny as Hades scene near the beginning of the film when he and his workmates are on the way out to the oil rig. He's a highly educated guy who ends up working a blue-collar job, mainly as a means to what?
Support himself.
Yeah. Well, a means of escaping from that other life he was living. A lot of people would say, Bobby, you're wasting your talents. Well, wasting your talents is a matter of what? That's a matter of opinion. Simply because everyone else wants this for me doesn't mean I what?
Have to do it.
Doesn't mean I ought to do it, nor that I want it for me. So in that way, he seems quasi-authentic. Well, they get caught in this traffic jam. And of course, Bobby and his friends are all hemming and hollering, and they're kind of pissed off because they're going to be late for work. Well, guess what Bobby sees in front of him on the back of a truck?
A piano.
He sees a piano. So he gets out of the car, he goes out, he gets to the back of the truck, and he's just playing a piano in the middle of a damn traffic jam. Messed up as can be. But sometimes messed up as it can be might be what life is all about, or maybe ought to be all about. And Bobby certainly looks like he's what? He looks like he's having a hoot, doing what he's doing right there in the moment. Even though it looks what?
Crazy.
It looks crazy, it's bizarre, he's doing the opposite of what you would expect people to do via the social cues in a traffic jam like that, but he's out there him-humming away on the piano. He's having a good time. He's having a good time. Oh, by the way, Bobby has problems with relationships, too. And there's a good reason why an alienated bloke like Bobby would have trouble with relationships. And probably why many of us have trouble with them. Because it means what word that starts with a C? And this is a very existential theme.
Commitment.
Commitment. Think about Kierkegaard. Remember, Kierkegaard said that I'm going to channel Sartre first. We are condemned to be free. We are forced to make choices whether we like it or not. Kierkegaard interpreted life's major choices as what he called either-or scenarios. You can choose the either or you can choose the or. But once you have made that choice, you can't what? You can't take it back. That is one of the reasons why choosing should be something we should take very seriously. Because through our choices, we define who we what? You define who you are by the choices you make. It's no wonder Bobby does not want to quote-unquote make these kinds of choices. Choices like this are scary. Having to make choices that are momentous as this, to some people, feel like a what? I'll channel, was it Commander Akbar here? It's a trap! It's a trap! Isn't that a meme now? Yeah. It feels like a trap. Bobby didn't want to put himself in a cage. And if you met up with a woman who was interested in him and he hung around with, for lack of being more vulgar about it, played by actress Karen Black. She was in a lot of B-horror movies, by the way. She was also in one of those bad airplane disaster movies. Yes, and some of your aficionados of 70s movies might know of whom I speak. But anyway, once you met up with Rayette, that was her name, you're like, well, dude, would you want to be stuck with her? She was very what? Not just, well, a particular kind of annoying. I'll use it starts with an N, ends in a Y.
Naggy.
Not quite, but very close. Needy. Rayette was extremely needy. And by the way, needy people aren't too bad at first to satisfy your Jesus complex. But after your Jesus complex is satisfied, needy is downright annoying. In other words, it can feel like a cage. So it's sort of no wonder, once Rayette starts dropping the love bomb, that Bobby's heading for the door. Now, of course, Bobby has done something else that we find out later. I don't want to give too many of the details. But of course, this is actually a theme in a lot of existential pictures. How many of you have seen the original version of the film Alfie? Not the crappy remake with Jude Law. Crap, 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 crap. I'm a film critic too. I'm talking about the original one with Michael Caine. Before Michael Caine started to be in a lot of crappy movies. You can't blame the guy who doesn't want to get paid. I mean, heck, I'd be in Jaws 4 in 3D if I could. One of the worst movies ever made, but I'm sure he got $1 million plus for being in the crappy thing. And that was back in the late 80s, I think. But anyway, sorry about the movie criticism there. But yeah, the character in the original Alfie he's basically a playboy philanderer. He lives on the dole as often as he can. He fakes nervous breakdown so he can get in a convalescent place to get over his nervous breakdown. He mooches off of women as often as he can. And he finally does what? He finally impregnates one of them. And boy, if there's not an existential quandary there, because immediately, what's his first thought? Get rid of it. Get rid of it. This is going to ruin my life. Perhaps not a very mature way to think about what? To think about another potential human life. But it's understandable why a person might think that way. It's a trap! To channel Commander Akbar again. Because in a way, once it's done, some people might conceive of their lives as being what? And I want this to sound as politically incorrect as it sounds. Many people would think that their life is over. And it's true that your old life is over. But it doesn't mean that you can't what? Doesn't mean there might not be a decent adventure to ensue next, if you're willing to think of it that way. If you're willing to think of it that way. But it's certainly not easy to. Because, by the way, it's not just an 18-year commitment. As me mom would say, you'll always be my little boy. Like I'm almost 50 and you're, you know. I don't call me by my full first name. That's the last thing I want to hear. I'd punch anyone else for doing it because it's you, Mom, I won't. Yes?
So, in this movie, does this guy's like social life die, or is it goals and everything that die?
Whose? Well, Alfie didn't have any goals. His goal was basically to bum around and get laid, if I can be absolutely blunt about it. And basically to live a completely uncommitted life. And by the way, Bobby in 5 Easy Pieces isn't all that different from the Alfie character. Because the fact is, he really doesn't want to commit to anything. And as soon as things start to feel squeezed in on him, and this is the spoiler, you know, at the end of the film, he's gone again. And he doesn't care that he's left an apartment behind. He doesn't care that he's left his pregnant girlfriend who he's trying to get rid of at a truck stop. He doesn't care. He leaves in the day to head north, probably to Alaska, not knowing where he's going. But for him, an aimless, inauthentic drifter, anywhere is better than being trapped in a cage. But perhaps our desire not to get trapped in the cage might be its own cage of inauthenticity. That was almost a bad pun, but yeah. Is that all right, I hope? Did I answer your question? Good, good. I love the picture, by the way. And it's one of the first pictures in which, well, then again, it's the second picture in which Jack Nicholson plays Jack Nicholson, as I like to call it. You know, he kind of has a stock kind of character he typically plays. Now, for those of you who saw About Schmidt, you may have noticed that the character he plays in About Schmidt is very un-Nicholson. The character he plays in About Schmidt is very un-Jack Nicholson. Why? This dude hates life. He's not a smartass at all like your typical Jack Nicholson characters. As a matter of fact, he's a depressed, dour person who basically lived a life of safe conformity because of his life's duties. And how did he get his life's duties? Like so many of us. And I guess I'm half admitting this about me. Like so many of us, we don't consciously choose our duties. We don't consciously choose our destinies. We aimlessly fall into them because it's too damn much responsibility to actually think about them and choose them for ourselves. He falls into these responsibilities, and then he takes society's roots, the leveled roots, to try to do what he thinks he's supposed to do. Not what he consciously thinks he's supposed to do, but what he has been told by societies he's supposed to do. And by the way, this probably goes for all of us, but in past generations, it went for men more than it went for women. And I'll borrow the line from a Breaking Bad character. For those of you who like TV, you might remember the drug kingpin. His name was Gus Fring. He always told Walter White what a man's duty is. Does anyone know what a man's duty is? Oh, come on, you guys. Yeah, he watches TV. Yeah.
Isn't it to provide?
Yes, a man's duty is to provide. In other words, reduced to basically an ATM machine. That is exactly the way Warren Schmidt thought of himself. An ATM machine. So instead of doing what he wanted to do with his life, he found steady, boring, stable employment, doing mundane actuarial work for an insurance firm. It's no wonder he lived his life without any passion. He wasn't following his passions. And it's no wonder he resented whom? This sounds like a talk I gave earlier when I was talking about Marx and alienation. It's no wonder he resented his wife and his daughter. He didn't love them. They were duties. They were money to be earned and paid for. It's hard to love someone when you think of them as just a duty, an abstract bill that has to be paid. It's no wonder his marriage blew chunks. And it's no wonder that his daughter hated him, didn't want to see him, didn't even want his ass at her wedding. You never behaved like a dad to me. And if you want to know why I'm marrying this guy you call a loser, it's because of you, Dad. At least this loser loves me. Oh, I'm sorry. That's kind of doing an impression from the film, yeah.
That is from About Schmidt, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, for those of you who are looking at Wild Strawberries, which is one of my favorite films, now there's a couple of things, and for those of you who've asked me to proofread, this is one of the comments I made. Just like About Schmidt, which is made over 30 years later, the main character in Wild Strawberries is a man past the autumn of his years. In other words, we know at the beginning of the film that he is acutely aware that the clock is running out. In his first nightmare, one of the things that he sees is a clock in the town when he's taking a walk. And there are no hands on the clock. Of course, people who are into symbolism will say, hey, this symbolizes what happens to our time after we've dead, after we've died. We fade off into eternal time. Eternal time, in a sense, is not time anymore. And by the way, he sees an unstable carriage that's a hearse. He also sees a man without a face, which is pretty damn what? It's scary. It's almost horror movie-esque. Now, inside of the casket, when the casket falls out of the... Now, the wheel falls off the cart, which might be symbolic, too. The wheels of my cart have fallen off more than once. You know, it's a common everyday metaphor. But anyway, the casket opens up. A hand comes out. You do know whose hand that is inside the casket. You know who he sees in the coffin. It's him. He knows his death is on the way. He is ironically getting what at the beginning? I mean, we find out at the beginning of the film, he is ironically going to be going on a journey to receive what? A Lifetime Achievement Award. And by the way, why does this trouble Isaac Borg so much? You can see it just by looking at him. He knows that even though in society's eyes he has lived a successful life, he has checked off all of the boxes that you're supposed to check off in life. You know, he's made money. His wife died, and he basically has a housekeeper. You know, he doesn't have to do anything for himself. He doesn't have to worry about the economic things that most of us have to worry about. And by the way, by all accounts, he probably shouldn't have to, because he was a successful doctor, and he also actually even invented medical equipment. But on some level, he knows what about himself?
Dead inside.
Yeah. He knows that he hasn't really lived. He's checked off all these boxes, but he never really lived. Because when your son hates the fact that he was even born, when you drive your wife not only to philandering, but ultimately to what? Suicide. On some level, he is forced to grapple with what fact? Even though she is the one who took her own life, he was what? He was responsible for it. And just to help some of you along, go ahead.
Where in the movie does it show that she committed suicide?
It's implied.
It's implied.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that some of you who have written a draft conspicuously were missing, and I mentioned, and this is important. If you don't mention Sarah, you're probably missing a very powerful plot point. Now, we see a spitting image of Sarah when they pick up hitchhikers. And the Sarah who is the hitchhiker not only looks like his Sarah, but in many ways she is carefree and free-spirited. The same things that he loved about Sarah. He loved Sarah like he loved no other. He'd hoped to what? He hoped to marry her. That all fell apart when his older, more dashing relative, Siegfried, ends up winning her heart. Now, by the way, if this isn't inauthentic, I don't know what is. He blames all of his failures, relationship-wise, on what? And by the way, this is about as inauthentic as it gets. None of the things that have happened to me in my life are my fault. If I was a failure at life, it's all because of what? Sarah. Sarah. My Sarah. I lost my Sarah. What's inauthentic about this? It's called failing to take responsibility for his own failings. And if you'll pardon my bluntness here, I hope it's helpful, but I hope it's not like spoon-feedy. I don't like spoon-feedy very much. What could be worse than allowing one thing catastrophic in your life to basically do what?
Take over?
Yeah, you allow it not just to ruin your own life, but you're willing to take everybody else who interacts with you down with you. How selfish a man is he? I mean, really. So, your love interest as a teenager didn't work out for you. And basically, you lived in an unhappy marriage. And it's your fault, Isaac. Your fault. Yeah, I know life's crapped on you. Life's crapped on whom? Life is crapped on everyone. No one ever said that the universe owed you anything. And as existentialism would say, a la Camus, the universe neither dislikes you nor likes you. The universe is just there. Abstract, meaningless. Just like your life. In the grand scheme of things, your life doesn't really mean anything with a capital M. Now, it ought to mean something to you, though. Why? For practical reasons, because you're living it. It ought to mean something for you.